Welcome to Traces of Trauma, where we explore the quiet echoes that trauma leaves behind and the gentle path of healing. I'm your host, Brian Arbor, inviting you to join me in conversations that honor our stories, our struggles, and the strength and grace it takes to move forward. This is a safe space to listen, reflect, and connect in the shared journey beyond our trauma. Welcome back, everyone. With me today is Carla Wainwright. Carla's a new acquaintance and holistic wellness coach, sexual awakening facilitator, and midlife alchemist. Awesome. Who supports women in navigating the challenges and transformations of midlife. With a background in biology, homeopathy, and more than 30 years as an embodiment teacher, Carla kind of bridges the gap between science and sacred practice to help with healing, reconnecting with our bodies, and rediscovering vitality. She's especially passionate about guiding women through the emotional, relational, and physical impacts of perimenopause and menopause, including how trauma can really shape and impact those experiences. And through her work, Carla creates spaces where women feel seen, supported, and empowered to transform survival into thriving.
Mm.
I love that midlife alchemist piece. Welcome. Anything else you'd like to say by way of introduction for yourself?
Oh, I think that covers a lot. No, thank you very much.
Good, good. And I know when we were talking before showing up to actually record this episode, a lot of your background, what you're up to, the work you do, resonates, at least for me, inside the experience of manhood as well. So there are changes as I step into my mid 40s that are happening physically, internally, emotionally. um, and while your uh, primary um, client or audience is women, a lot of the work you do really pertains to everyone. And there are some differences, right? There are biological differences, there are different emotional needs, and um, trauma, the trauma that's common in one gender might not be as common in another.
Mhm.
And the ways that we uh, face that trauma and the ways that it shapes us can tend to differ. I'd love to just hear from you, like, how did you find yourself in this work of like midlife alchemy, sexual awakening, and holistic wellness?
Yeah, I would love to share that. So I think like many people who are in this field, they come to it because of their own lived experiences and the healing path that they've really navigated themselves. And that was certainly true of my story. So, as a young person, as a child, was highly anxious. Had a challenging, home situation, particularly with my dad, that created a lot of stress, ongoing stress, and I think also just a genetic thread of highly anxious people through, my mom's line. And that translated in many ways to me becoming, what felt safe for me was to become kind of an overachiever and a people pleaser, and like these traits that, many people who have anxiety and trauma really fall into because it feels like a way that we can kind of control the environment around us. And so academically, I did really well. I went into biology and I worked there, and then in my 20s, I experienced two sexual assaults that really completely turned my life upside down. And so, even though I had these coping strategies to deal with, um, the past experiences of my life and trauma, this just became too much for me to really handle. And I had a nervous breakdown at 25. That wasn't, yeah, I don't really know how he diagnosed that, but if I look back at that period of my life, really that's what it felt like what was happening to me. And my body just began to really shut down in a lot of ways. I just was in a constant state of hypervigilance. I just couldn't really connect with my partner in the way, who is an extremely safe and wonderful person. I'm still with him 30 plus years later. But I really was struggling in so many areas of my life, and work also became really, really difficult. So I started on this path of wanting to heal that, but actually didn't really find a lot of support in the mainstream medical system at the time. Actually was, probably counterproductive. Unfortunately, I know there were lots of incredible practitioners. I just wasn't fortunate to have those in my corner. And anyway, at one point, I went to a yoga class, and at that time, I was doing super long distance running. I was constantly pushing myself, doing things that would just help numb out the way that I was feeling.
Yeah.
And I went to this yoga class and I, excuse me, I kind of expected we were just going to like roll around on the floor, or like I was like quite dismissive of the whole thing. Somebody invited me to go and I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I'll go to that, but it's, not going to be enjoyable. And something happened in that moment of being there, um, that sparked some kind of experience in my body, in my being that I don't even know if I'd ever felt before. Like there, perhaps I really got into a true parasympathetic state. I connected with my breath. My body felt alive in a way that just was so foreign, but so exciting to me. And I was like, I don't know what this is, but I know I need more of this.
Mm.
So that really started me on this path of exploring um, yoga, embodiment, the more, esoteric practices. And then you sort of fast forward, started to study Tantra, and I had some really incredible teachers that helped me heal my trauma. I don't would say it's never completely healed, but move much more fully into a path of healing. And it became such a profound experience for me that I really decided I was going to leave behind my career, my established career that, conformed to all the things that society tells us we should do and the check boxes, and really dive into this healing, not only for myself, but to support other people. So primarily women, but I, of course, have worked with many, many men throughout all of that time. And, that has really been my path for the past several decades of embodiment, and really connecting back with the wisdom and the deep healing capacity of the body, which I believe is within each and every one of us.
Yeah. Very cool. And so you run a business now of your own design, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I actually opened a yoga studio in 2000, which I had for 22 years, and then, of course, COVID happened. But and I did that while also being a biologist. But then, kind of let that go, and then I've been working, as a coach and practitioner for many, many years now. So yes, I've been doing this entrepreneurial thing for quite some time.
Awesome. And so what does it look like to facilitate midlife alchemy for someone? Like
Mhm.
what shapes does that take?
Yeah. So the reason I call myself a midlife alchemist is because the exploration that I guide is what I call a journey into the sacred metabolism. And so this what I think is this really beautiful and necessary fusion between science and sacred. And so, on the one hand, we're looking at, I'll back up for a second. So, our metabolism is really how we use energy in the body. And so, of course, from the physical point of view, we take in food, and then that our metabolism converts that into energy that we can use. But we also have an energy body, right? That isn't, we can't see it, but it's absolutely there. And that also needs to be tended to. And many practices that we do to support the energy body. So, my work as a midlife alchemist is really fusing and bringing those two approaches together. And in many ways, I of course meet my client wherever they're at. So often it will be easier for somebody to perhaps start with the energetic piece. On the other hand, sometimes it's a lot easier for people to start with the physical metabolism. And once we get a sense of more receptivity and safety and the body responding, then I begin to weave those other elements in. So when somebody comes to me, it's really, first of all, like working with any practitioner, it's about creating trust. It's about creating a space where a container where somebody really can express what's happening for them, and then really guiding them in the best way to support that journey with the vision that the sacred metabolism is really supported in its fullness over time.
Mhm. Cool. And w- uh I'm like, wow. And how does someone um engage in nurturing that um that energy self? Like how I don't even know how I would go about like feeding that, fueling that, like having it be healthy. Like what does that look like?
So you do know how to do that. It's just that you need a little prompting to remember. So I believe that everybody has that innate wisdom, but of course, our culture and society hasn't deemed that important, right? We've kind of put the physical as the most important, the pinnacle of everything. And so how do we do that? Well, one of the first things is slowing down, right? Is like slowing down to actually feel what's happening. And that often for somebody who's experienced trauma needs to be done in, titrated in very small
Mm,
and safe ways to begin to build that window of tolerance, to build the capacity of allowing ourselves to feel, right? So for so many of us who've experienced trauma, we often feel disassociated from our bodies. We're sort of like the head, and then whatever's happening below that is just this sort of mystery and maybe something that I don't trust or feels very uncomfortable. So, going very, very slowly to allow like incremental moments of just feeling. Connecting to the senses is a really big one. So when we connect to the senses, which are so powerful, we send signals to the body that, oh, actually, I can just be present in these small moments. Breath is also enormously important, connecting with our capacity to breathe, to bring ourselves into a more parasympathetic state. And then I would also say pleasure. Like pleasure is a huge part of awakening the energetic body. And pleasure doesn't need to mean sexual pleasure, it just means coming into a place of aliveness and enjoyment. And again, the senses are a great gateway into that. But pleasure has an enormous capacity to heal and to allow us to begin to feel greater levels of sensation in the body, which is really energy moving, right? And so as we become more and more attuned to our pleasure capacity, our connection with life, our connection with our own bodies, we begin to feel energy in subtler and subtler ways, which is very, very powerful. And then that becomes almost like a compass within us that helps guide us, right? When we can actually feel at these deeper levels the energy body, it allows us to have that compass that takes us and gives us information towards what is innermost and highest good.
yeah. And in your work, you describe midlife as this opportunity, like that there's a rite of passage. How do we grab a hold of that opportunity and like really use the what we would traditionally call midlife crisis as a catalyst for engaging with and really doing some intense healing work to set aside some of those things that have been holding us back as we step into the next chapter.
So I do really feel like midlife it's a powerful portal. And, you know, often things that we could endure when we were younger just become harder and harder to either escape or just not pay attention to in some respect. And part of that actually has to do with the effect on our physical metabolism, right? So if we've had chronic stress for a very long period of time, our blood sugar becomes more and more destabilized, and that actually mimics a stress or trauma response in the body. And
Mm,
so we might have been able to deal with that when we were younger with more ease, but as we get older, the body becomes less resilient to these sorts of things. And so what can happen in midlife, I would just say for women too, we lose those protective effects from estrogen and progesterone, which often are a buffer to stress and also a buffer to our blood sugar levels and swings. So for men, they don't have, of course, that same type of hormonal system. But at the same time, it's also true for men, as I was saying, that, over time, chronic stress really does impact the way that we feel. And we can actually put ourselves in trauma loops over time because of not being metabolically healthy. And I should say that it's estimated that only 8% of people are metabolically healthy, right? So it's a
mm,
staggeringly low number. And so many of us get stuck in that survival mode. One of the things that happens, though, in midlife is that we reach this kind of point where we really, it's like a choice point. Like, is this how I want to continue to live, or can I make another decision? And this choice point is really, this is the powerful portal. It's the opportunity to step into a new version of yourself that tends to be more unapologetic, is clearer about what they want, and really own that version of themselves.
mm.
Women particularly become less people pleasing. And I don't know, you can tell me from your experience as a man. But this desire or need to be a people pleaser, which is also a trauma response, right? The fawning response.
Sure.
Um, that can be, speaking from experience, very hard to let go of. But there are some biochemical shifts that happen that just make it a little bit easier,
Yeah,
right? And so
definitely.
there's a room to author a truer story. Um, you know, the capacity for our brains to rewire is alive and well. So we can take on new habits and meaning making rituals to write new pathways for ourselves.
Mm,
And um, if we couple that with community and getting support and all of these things, there's an opportunity to really reframe our narrative and step into our wisdom selves, right? The whole idea of like the crone is the crown, right? So this is wearing our crown and really owning that our silver hair is the crown. And so it's a choice point for sure. And not everybody makes that choice point, but I do feel like for myself, it's really important to reframe that narrative that midlife is not a decline, but it's actually an opportunity to step into our wisdom selves. And there's something enormously powerful about that, not only for ourselves as individuals, but for society.
yeah. And there's just such a lack of um like trustworthy information
Mm.
in metabolic health and like spiritual health and like energetic health. It's this chain of fad diets and like so bringing your background in biology to metabolism and wellness and holistic approaches for like an overall well-being. Um, it's a really powerful combo. How does someone go about restoring like metabolic health? What does that take?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, one of the incredible things about our modern age is that we have so much access to information, and it's also the real challenge, right? It's sort of like, how do we navigate this and find out what's right or true? And that said, of course, science is always evolving and shifting. But I think that there's become a real recognition over the past, several years of the importance of really tending to our metabolic health by really honoring our evolutionary design, right? So if we think about the human body that evolved over thousands of generations, we have always been able to navigate our bodies using two different kinds of energy systems. So sorry, I should really clarify because I was talking about the sacred and metabolic energy system. So let me just
Mhm.
rephrase that. There's two ways that we can source um, physical energy for the body. So the first is, of course, by eating food. And the second is actually when we don't eat food and we create something called ketones. So maybe you've heard of ketones before. And so if we go back in time, our bodies were actually designed to thrive in times where we would be eating and times where we would not be eating. And one of the great challenges that we experience now in our modern society is we've lost that ability, that the switch that takes us between using glucose as fuel, which would be food, to ketones has gotten really rusty. And that's because we kind of eat constantly, right? And our bodies were not evolutionarily designed to do that. They were actually designed to have periods where we ate and periods where we don't eat. Now, this can be a challenge for people. And it's something that we absolutely need to go slow with. But introducing longer periods of not eating is one of the really most powerful ways to begin to create more health within our metabolic system. And what I suggest to people as the very, very first step is to just move into a 12-hour eating window. So if we divide the day 24, we have 12 hours where we don't eat, and we have 12 hours where we do eat. And that's a really powerful step to beginning to regain more metabolic health. So this really has to do with the timing of when we eat. There are a lot of other things that we can do to support our metabolic health. Um, Eating lots of probiotic foods. That's also really our gut plays a central role in terms of our metabolic health. So, eating fermented foods, eating foods that feed the bacteria in the gut. So, these are called prebiotics and polyphenols. So, things like olive oil, omega 3s, nuts and seeds, all of those kinds of things also help stabilize our blood sugar. Um, and then there's the whole piece that supports metabolic health around circadian rhythm. So getting sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning, so important. Standing with your bare feet on the ground, following natural rhythms of daylight and darkness. All of these things are so important to support our metabolism. And, if we reflect on our modern lives, we've become so far away from this, right? We're inundated with artificial light. We have so much blue light from our blue screens. We're eating continually through the day, so we're constantly moving through spikes and crashes in our blood sugar. We don't give our digestive system a break. There's so much processed food, which also disrupts the microbiome. So, this is just a little flavor of some of the things we can do. But just to recap, I would say, for listeners, if you can even just start with a 12-hour eating window, so just do that, and make sure you get some sunlight into your eyes first thing in the morning. So no sunglasses. You don't obviously look at the sun, but just like staring out into the sky and getting some of that sunlight, standing with your feet on the grass if the weather allows you to do that. And then just really focusing on the most nourishing natural foods that you can. Just those things are going to create such a positive impact. Um, in how you feel. And then for those people who are struggling with trauma, it will make a big impact as well. It will absolutely have a huge impact.
Yeah. And so for folks who find that pleasure you mentioned in the processed foods, in the I myself struggle with I just crave uh especially in periods of stress. Like I'll go through, I need something salty, I need something crunchy, I want something sweet. I want all those things at the same time, and I just stare into the fridge. Um, where my um regulating comes from is that uh ingestion distraction.
Mhm.
So are there any um I don't know, like, okay, so I have a 12-hour window and I'd prefer to stick to more natural foods. Cool. Um, how do we break um, or do we even need to focus on breaking um, the calorie habit inside those 12 hours?
When you mean calorie habit of how much you ingest, is that what you're
Of
saying?
like how much, how often, what kind,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is I totally hear you. It's also been my lived experience. Like I am a former sugar addict. Sugar was the way that I regulated or self-soothed. I
yeah.
wouldn't say I regulated, but I
Yeah, it's
definitely
kind of more of a
self-soothed.
dysregulator.
Yeah.
It's a trap.
And that started for me as a child. I would be hiding sugary things in my room because then when I'd be upset, I'd go up, into my room, and those things would be my mechanism of self-soothing. So it's been a very challenging process for me to unwind that in my life. I would go visit my parents and I would just go on sugar binges again because of the stressful environment. So I just want to share a lot of understanding and empathy that this is real, and this has also been my lived experience. So a few things that I'd love to share about that. So one of the remarkable things is that when we begin to shift what we eat, um, and our microbiome changes, so the composition of microbes in your gut, your tastes change. So you actually eat to feed your microbes, and your microbes are what dictate your cravings. So if we continue to eat processed foods, your microbes are going to send the signal to your brain, more processed food, right? They're going to want that. When we start to shift to other kinds of food, then your cravings indeed do change. And this has been my own experience, and I've seen this over and over and over again. So I just want to, that sometimes can be helpful to know that, oh, like even if I shift what I eat, I'm always going to want all of those treats. That's not true. Over time, and it actually doesn't take that long, you will not actually crave those things anymore. But it does require that transition period. So that's a kind of a hopeful thing to
Yeah.
understand.
And while the biological cravings will shift,
Hmm.
sometimes it's those habits, that
Yes.
mental habit of going back to the same thing. I am I sometimes equate my eating with smoking. Like there's oh, I want cake. It's like it's time for some cake.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily that cake is the thing I need, but like, have I had enough fiber today? And like, do I need some carbohydrates? And where can I get them where they're not laden with sugar, right? So there's a sort of transition um, as we start to listen to our bodies um, and getting curious, I think, about like, okay, well, what is this craving really asking for?
Hmm.
If it's not the way I'm used to satisfying it. Um, I've been through a couple cycles of changing my eating habits, and for sure, when I was at my best, um, my my crunchy cravings were raw Brussels sprouts.
Mm.
Like I'd like cut them, clean them, do the thing, and I would throw in my big. I had to get a big lunchbox to take to work all of a sudden, but I'd have a container of like halved raw Brussels sprouts for when I needed something like crispy, crunchy, fresh. And but man, when I was kicking potato chips, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and having this debate with myself. Like, I could get out of bed without waking my partner and like get to the kitchen, and the garage door is right there. If I took the chips into the garage, then nobody would hear the bag
Mhm.
and I could have chips and then I could go back to bed. But do I need to brush my teeth first so I don't get caught? Because we're doing this together. And like the planning of what it would take and the craving for it and the like I'm not gonna okay, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. But why can't I go to sleep? Because all I can think about is
Mhm.
like I'm awake in the middle of the night and I want potato chips.
Yeah.
And it um that there was such a struggle in me in that moment it's an experience that has stuck with me.
Mhm.
Like, whoa. There's something going on with me and food that um is a lot like more significant than I thought.
Yeah.
Um and like sometimes the changes don't um like they don't hit the same emotionally. Like those substitutions, the good substitutions, like don't hit the same uh like they don't create the same pleasure.
Yeah.
So it takes getting accustomed to different pleasures. To be to, like um I don't do ice cream hardly at all anymore, but I keep frozen mangoes in the freezer. Like just like they're cubed and like quick frozen and there's no stuff. So I'll have a bowl of frozen fruit um at 7 o'clock at night when I'm like sitting and watching TV and my partner's having Oreos and milk. um and uh now that's what I want. Like when
Yeah.
I don't have fruit in the freezer, I'm like, man, and that's my frozen fixation. That's like my cold, that's my sweet. Um, and then once I break that seal, it's like, ooh, I just had cake at somebody's birthday. We need cake again. And
Mhm.
I'm right back to where I started. Like that it's like losing a type of sobriety.
Yeah.
And so it like the challenge of making some of these changes is um like it's not small and it takes support. So I imagine part of that support comes in like a relationship with you as a client. How do we build those kinds of support and like compassionate scaffolding for these kinds of changes in our lives?
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that story. Super relatable, absolutely relatable. And um, so the first thing I love like this scaffolding, this compassionate scaffolding. So I mean, this is one of the reasons I think that when you're doing this deep work, working with somebody who can relate to the experience is so powerful, right? Because, as you're sharing that story, it's like, well, I can recall instances in my own life where I'm like, yep, I totally understand what Brian's talking about here because my own lived experience mirrors that. Um, I really believe that one of the beautiful things about creating an intention or a commitment to invite a shift, not even that you're expecting the shift to happen, but to being curious about it, is that you get to do it over and over again. And so, of course, it's going to be imperfect and there are going to be detours. And perhaps, instead of the Brussels sprouts, you're going to go for the chips. And that's okay, right? Part of the healing container is feeling safe enough to share that without being judged, and then to connect into the wisdom of the body in terms of what's happening there. So that's a lot of the somatic work that I do is really just uncovering, where is the part of you that is feeling like there's an unmet need or has a purpose of some kind, and it's often a protective purpose, right? And
Yeah.
so the eating really can connect to this feeling of I'm providing you with a temporary feeling of safety, right? So it's creating some context and understanding, and of course so much compassion around that. And then I think also understanding that food is one of the most challenging things to deal with because unlike other addictions or habits, like we still need to eat, right? We could make the choice to not smoke ever again and we're going to live just fine, but you can't not eat. So it is a constant, it can be a constant struggle because it's something that we just still have to engage in every day. When we begin to understand that when we are feeling dysregulated and we're in a state of high cortisol, um, when we have that craving and understanding that actually what can be the best antidote for cortisol, pleasure being one of them, yes, and food provides pleasure, but also movement, we give ourselves some more choice points at that, in that moment. So cortisol is really if we think about it, it's the hormone of movement. The reason it comes up is because it's driving the body to move towards a place that is safer. And so sometimes what we can do is make a different choice around um, creating a state change, which food always does. But can we do something different and then return back to the wisdom of the body and actually noticing, do I still need this? Right? So these are some of the tools that we can use, and they're imperfect, right? Sometimes we're not going to make that choice. But when we recognize that I'm feeling this, I'm feeling dysregulated, my habit is to do this, what my body is actually asking for is a state changer. What are other ways that I can change this state? And then notice what's happening in the internal landscape, and then ask again whether I really need this or whether I can choose to do something different again.
Yeah. And so there's this, uh, so the body, what is it? The body keeps the score,
Yep.
has come up repeatedly in conversations here on the podcast. And there's it focuses mostly on the physical. And there's it seems like there would be a score kept in the energetic body as well. And how, I'm like, I find myself on the edge of like, okay, this isn't too far out there. Like I could get how metabolism and the way we fuel and tend to ourselves impacts our both our lived experience of persisting trauma and our ability to engage in our healing. Um, but that's kind of a like wide leap.
Mm,
Like, how do like our physical and emotional energy translate to capacities for resilience and recovery?
So how does the connection between the two, or how do they each just
Like,
individually
how do
contribute to
they,
that?
yeah, like how do these two things meet? Like, what
Mm,
makes metabolism uh, an important practice in trauma recovery? Because from the outside, they could look like two like completely different
mhm.
like fields of study.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think that for a long, long time, science was very focused on compartmentalizing the lived experience of being human.
Mm.
And so systems would be studied in separation from one another. But the reality is, of course, is that we are, holistic beings where everything is interconnected. And I think that that's one of the really exciting things that are happening in our awareness and understanding of the body is how interconnected everything is. So, for instance, I was listening to a podcast the other day with a researcher from Stanford where there is a metabolic psychiatry department.
Cool.
Yeah, and the profound effects that uh, metabolic health practices have on mental health disorders and challenges, like really massive, massive effects, right? So when
Mm.
we take care of our metabolic health, when we really tend to this physical body, the impact that that can have on our mental and emotional health is absolutely profound. And I would also say that the energetic piece is part of that as well, because, the wisdom traditions around the world have recognized the importance of our energy body. If we go look at the Taoist system or yogic system, indigenous cultures all over the world have a deep reverence and appreciation for our energy bodies. So, modern Western science has a little bit of catch up to do around that, but there's always been a recognition of how important our energy body has been to vitality, vibrancy, aliveness. And so we aren't just one or the other. And I think that we've done ourselves a real disservice by compartmentalizing aspects of our health and um, thriving into like these discrete sections that aren't really interconnected with one another.
Yeah. Cool. So even if it seems, hard to grasp, taking care of a piece of ourselves um, nurtures all of ourself.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. And I love how you said that, like a piece of ourselves, because if we suddenly think, well, I got to do all the things, I got to take care of all the things, that that just brings us into a place of overwhelm. And then when we're overwhelmed, then we tend to shut down. So always returning back to this idea of like titration, just small,
Yeah.
doable amounts that increase our window of tolerance to perhaps be curious about inviting in more.
Yeah. When we shut down, it's back to cake.
Yep.
That's the cycle. Um, you mentioned earlier the tantric work and its importance in um facing and healing some of the sexual trauma you'd experienced. And I feel like we could just have like a whole other episode on that topic, but I'd love to hear from you a little bit about what it looks like to recover both physically, like our bodies are attuned to our stress, especially in intimate situations like that. Um, how, what can we do to begin to have sex be more comfortable, more natural, less connected to the things that happened to us,
Mhm.
and more for our um, pleasure and for our um, like expression and connectedness as beings.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. So, for many of us, we experience a lot of shutdown if we've had trauma, and trauma can look like all different kinds of things, of course, which really, for many of us, means that we're just kind of going through the motions without actually even being in our bodies, right? And so, how do we come back from that? So, for myself and in the work that I do, um, beginning to reacquaint yourself with your own body as a source of pleasure and being curious about just creating a new story there is extraordinarily powerful. Often it can be a big leap for somebody to go from, okay, I'm really feeling shut down sexually and trying to do all the healing with a partner. Now that's important, but it has to start within yourself. And so um, connecting with the body and beginning to, first of all, slow down and discover what you like in terms of connecting with yourself is enormously important. So, most people masturbate self-pleasure, but it's very like, it's kind of always the same. It's just, I'm getting to an end goal, but I'm actually not really paying attention to the sensations in my body. Do I like this? Do I like this? Can I focus on the different senses in terms of visual, sound, touch, taste, smell, all of these sorts of things to begin to awaken the pleasure capacity that we have? It's really our birthright that's within us, but for many people is enormously narrow. So starting to wake those that deeper sensation up within ourselves by I'm really very much in favor of like scheduling self-pleasure time and creating a whole experience around it. So, can I set up the room? Can I have the right music? Can I maybe have some delicious food that I'm going to enjoy? Could I put some essential oils? Can I take a bath? Can I do all of these things? Can I begin to expand and gift myself the time to begin to rewire my nervous system around sexual pleasure?
Mm.
And you have to slow down and you have to take time. This is not something that can be done in 5 or 10 minutes. It is really something that to wire safety into the nervous system around sexual pleasure, we have to slow down.
Yeah.
And so this is a big piece of that is creating intimate opportunities with yourself so that you can begin to really get clear on what it is that you like and what it is that you need. And then you'd be able to describe that to a partner. But often what happens is that even if a partner just asks you, what do you like? That was my own situation for many, many years. It's like, I don't even know. I don't know how to answer that question. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, in especially where trauma is present, often we find ourselves dissociating from ourselves. So the like not looking in the mirror, not spending time with ourselves, staying busy as an like a it's productive. It can be turned into a superpower, but it's also an avoidance of ourselves. Of like, we don't want to just be alone with our thoughts. The TV's always on, the radio's always on. There's never just me sitting here with me.
Yeah,
And that, um, like you said, it takes scheduling a time, like actually carving out a time free from distraction to
yeah,
be with ourselves and um, let those experiences, let those emotions move through so that we can discover, what we want, what feels good, and um, like what feels good today.
that's right. That's right. And again, you can just start. Maybe you're just going to give yourself a luxurious hand massage, with a nice essential oil, and that's maybe as much as you're going to do, and just making space for that. You don't have to go right away to something that's much more sexual, right? But creating the space. And so, um, my recommendation is book a time in your calendar weekly. And it's a time that, if you had a date with somebody or a dentist appointment, you wouldn't flake out on that and you don't flake out on this. Like that appointment with yourself, it's one of the most healing things that you can do is to just grace yourself with enough time and space. Yeah, to just get curious and give yourself the healing that you deserve.
Yeah, really awesome. Thank you so much. This has been just a really peaceful, um, restorative conversation.
Mm.
So I
Yeah, thank you,
appreciate you
Brian.
joining me here. And how do folks get a hold of you? Like, what is there anything that you want to offer to our audience here?
Yes. So I know that many of your female listeners will definitely resonate with what we've talked about today. And I've created something called the Vibrancy Guide. It's a free resource that has science-based and body honoring practices to really come back into your energy and connect with that vital life force spark within you. It's 5 easy steps that you can take today. So you can go to vibrancyguide.com, and that's the best place to reach me. Men, you're welcome to go too. There'll be stuff in that guide, even though it's directed for women. There'll definitely be pieces in there that will be applicable to everyone. So that will take you to my website. And if anybody's curious or wants to talk more, I love having conversations. So I would love to hear from you.
Great. And you also do retreats, yeah?
I do. I'm just gotten back into doing international retreats after a short hiatus. But I do retreats. I live in British Columbia, so I do them here, but then I also do retreats in Mexico and Europe as well.
Very cool. And then are you still podcasting yourself, or has that chapter kind of come to a close or maybe on pause at the moment?
My podcast, I did it for 3 years and it's now come to a close. So it's possible I'll start another one again, but right now I'm just being a guest.
Right on.
Yeah.
Very cool. And if you'd like to find more about that, it was called The Radical Sex Witches. It's a
Yep.
super fun podcast. I enjoyed a couple episodes after we first spoke. So feel free to go to the website, vibrancyguide.com, to find out more about Carla Wainwright and all of this amazing work she's doing in metabolism and healing and really embracing our midlife and later life transitions as an opportunity to uh, really lean into our healing rather than uh, holding those things in a context of like one more trauma to endure. Thank you so much for being here. And for all of our listeners, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. And you can find more of Traces of Trauma at Substack with a little bit more of my personal story. All right. We'll see you next time.